Yeah, we should be good in just a second. Yeah, we're live. Andrea Allen, welcome to the show. It's so lovely to have you.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here. Appreciate you thinking of me and reaching out to me. It's awesome.
Oh, lady, you are one of the rock stars of our industry, and you'll be the last one to admit it. That's kind of what qualifies you as a bona fide rock star.
Oh, well, thank you.
The things that you've been doing have been blowing my mind and so many people's minds around the world. You are the co-owner of Onyx Coffee Lab. You are a competitor. You are a mother of two beautiful little ones, and you somehow managed to keep it all together.
Well, thank you. That's it's funny to hear you say that because I feel like often like I'm a kid acting like an adult. So the things you just listed are adult things. So maybe I've made it. I don't know.
Yeah, you know, we get people say a lot on this show and on Instagram lives when people comment to us, they say like, you know, the people that come on this show make it look so easy, but we constantly reinforce this idea that nobody really knows what they're doing, especially when they kind of look successful. Anyone who's pretending like, I got it all fucking figured out.
Lies. Yeah, all lies.
Have you at any point figured, I'm going to know how to do this?
I don't know. I feel like every time I arrive at a feeling where I'm like, I feel good. Like I feel like things are, you know, or for me personally, like I know what I'm doing, things are happening, then things change. And so it's like always kind of a reimagining and really like just a learning process, trying to hear and see what other people are doing and see how we can like apply that in our business and really just like apply that in my life. You know, I want to always be growing and learning because I feel like if you're not growing and learning, you're kind of going backwards. So it's always a process.
Did you, like, I talk a lot about this idea of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable when you're an entrepreneur and you're in business. Does that sit with you?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We're always trying to figure out how we can push quality and push service in our cafes and in our business. And that's never a comfortable thing when you're messing with your customers' routines. You are always in a place where they could either take it really well or not. And so there's always an edge of uncomfortability in that way. And then we're just always trying to push ourselves and our staff to keep being better in coffee, keep being better as managers and people and as a shop culture and company culture. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of uncomfortable things that come with all of that.
Do you actually talk to your staff about, hey, listen, here at Onyx Coffee Lab, we are all about always getting better?
Yes. Yeah.
How do they respond to that?
Usually when people come in, they kind of know it from the very beginning. So we have like a set of educational classes that the staff go through before they start working for us. There's 6 classes, and really the communication throughout all of those classes, we cover sourcing coffee, offerings that we have, brewing. I do customer service, and then like a menu class where we just talk about how to like guide people through what we're doing here and connect them with the right drink. And really, in both of my classes that I teach, I actually say, like, you will see John and I in the shop all the time trying to figure out how to make things better. You know, don't stop learning at this point because like you'll be learning the whole time you're here. And we reinforce that as people go through training. And then with our core staff of like managers and leaders inside of our business, we're always kind of talking about how we can make things better. And I always like make a joke because one of our like slogans, if you will, is never settle for good enough. And I really feel like that sums up like how we operate. And we're always trying to continually be creating and pushing what we're doing. So
I wish the industry would take on that idea. Like I think we as an industry need to start looking at this idea of good enough seems to be the bar right now. And I think that we need to do better at so many things. And it's a process, but having that mentality of good enough isn't good enough.
Yeah.
I like that idea. Tell me about these classes. Who came up with this idea?
Yeah, so I guess it was my husband, John. But part of what's challenging about staffing our retail locations is just, we need someone to start, you know, we need them in 2 to 3 weeks to be ready to go. But we also need them to be fluent in the language of coffee and of Onyx. And so partially because of where we're located in Arkansas, there's not a ton of coffee professionals around here. And then also because of my preference to, I love starting with clean slates in coffee. And so kind of our idea is like, well, we have people that like enjoy coffee, are interested in what we're doing, but how do we get them from going like 1 foot in the door to being able to talk to a customer and make a recommendation about a pour over or a retail bag or a mocha, you know, fluently. And so, those 6 classes have been described to me by one of our managers as drinking from a fire hydrant. So we kind of like trial by fire our staff. And, you know, there's just a whole language set that goes along with coffee that unless you work in coffee or are a coffee, you know, advocate, you don't necessarily know terms about processing, about how coffee is traded, how it's prepared, all of those things. So, so kind of the goal is it's outside of the cafe space, or we teach the classes in our cafe space, but you know, the employee is not being asked to like perform tasks or do anything except like listen and try to absorb like all of our philosophies and all of the things that go into what we feel like makes our business what it is. So that's kind of like the first step in getting somebody to be fluent in coffee. We love people and customers and each other here. So like communicating to them, how do we execute that in a large scale way and then in a small scale way. And so those classes are designed to try to get people as quickly up to speed as possible.
I'm a big fan of Onyx. I've never hidden that. I've you know, you guys are elixir dealers, and I talk about you guys a lot on this podcast because I think that you guys are hitting the points that I would love to see businesses that have the potential to grow. I would love to see those businesses hitting those points. And a couple of those things for me are things like the attention to detail that you have on brand. You know, everything's beautiful, but it's not beautiful for no reason. It's beautiful because it really fits in with the vibe that I get from both you and John. And it flows through to all your other staff. Everybody that I've ever spoken to from Onyx Coffee Lab has always been on message with what the brand is.
Yeah, thank you. We spend a lot of time working on that stuff and talking about it. And one of the things that's fun is just that John and I are the sole owners of Onyx. So there's John, I'm like the wet towel on everything, and I like make all the logistic budget kinds of things work. And then John's like the creative vision sort of person. But a lot of the stuff we do, I feel like somebody older and probably wiser might say like, hey, that's not a great idea. But partially because we just kind of do whatever we want. Like we just do some of those creative things and then like cross our fingers and hope that people like it. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
You know, it's been interesting for me as the owner of Elixir to watch people respond to the way that when we announced that Onyx was going to be our Elixir Roaster of the Month, and then when you guys started becoming Elixir dealers, we had people from your customers from around the world contact us saying how happy they are that Onyx was doing this and how much they love Onyx and how much they love serving Onyx. We particularly had a couple of people from the Middle East contact us.
Awesome.
And say that. And I felt really proud on your behalf, not that I really had the right to or anything like that, but as someone who's really advocating for and, you know, conspiring to each other's success is something that, you know, that's our tagline at Mapper Forward. But it's this idea that there are people who are kind of holding the flag for just backing yourself and backing it in a really intelligent way. And I know you described yourself as like the wet towel over John's creativity. John calls you the hero.
Yeah.
He's like, she's the hero of this story.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny because I feel like he's the hero of the story.
Which is just so absolutely you too. That's perfect.
It's really funny because I just, probably like most people, I'm not really very into change. And so over the years, we have changed so many things. And I'd like to say that my change button is broken, or, you know, it's like I just mostly say yes now until there's like a real reason to say no. But definitely in the beginning, there was like a real struggle for him to like get me on board with what he was wanting to do in coffee and just like in wholesale in our cafes. And it was mainly for me just like fear. I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about early or being uncomfortable. And for me, you know, I felt like at certain junctures throughout our careers, I'm like, oh, we're doing good. We kind of like made it, like we're paying the bills and like we're, you know, paying ourselves and we're paying our staff. Like we're doing great. We can just coast right here. We'll be good. And I just like had to learn from him and others over time. It's like, that's, I mean, not to be lame, but that's like not good enough, you know. Yeah. But really that part of making a dynamic company where, you know, our staff is engaged and ourselves are engaged and our customers are interested and engaged is continuing to create. So without him, we would be like we wouldn't even be Onyx. So
would you say that your risk appetite has increased?
Mine? Yeah, I think it has. I feel like I've gained more confidence in what we're doing, you know, just over the last however long, 6 years, 7 years. And so I feel like I still feel fear about risk, but I also trust that like John I trust his vision and I trust his like wisdom. And so for me, like I have a space to express my anxiety, but then I just trust that it's going to work out however it's supposed to work out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I guess after 6 years, to give credit where credit's due, like this ship doesn't just drive itself, you know, like you've put together the different parts on this ship where you can start trusting that there are some people on board that are great supporters of what you're doing and your vision.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we owe so much to our staff. I was just actually teaching one of those classes for a new employee this morning. And just at the end, I was just telling her, I mean, we are what we are because of our staff. I love serving customers and I love making coffee. And I might serve maybe one customer a week these days because as most people that try to like move up in coffee know, the more you move up, the more you usually move away from what you originally drew you to coffee, which for me is like actually just making drinks and talking with people and talking with customers. So, so I was just telling her, I was like, you know, we're only as strong as our staff is, and you're now one of our staff members, and like we are supporting you, advocates for you. Like we are on your side. So if you need something, come to me, you know, and just trying to encourage her about just her hopefully career that she has with us. And really throughout our business, there's all kinds of people that are like totally bought into what we're doing. And they are really like what makes our business work. There's too many things working for us to even like have a solid hand in anything. So we really owe a lot to all those people that are excited and on board with us.
How many cafes is it now? 3?
3, yeah. And we're opening a 4th one in hopefully November. It's kind of a moving target with new
which is March.
Yeah, I know. It's like
right.
We started working on this project in November of 2015. So
ouch.
Like a long, yeah. It's really like putting the rest of our construction projects to shame in terms of time, but it's in the finishing processes now. So hopefully this fall. Yeah.
Is that the new roastery, or is that separate from the new roastery? Okay.
Yeah, so we're doing a roastery and a cafe in the same space. So both of the work is happening on those at the same time.
When John came on the podcast, he was telling us how you guys have certain philosophies about what dictates when you open a new store. When we teach our Map It Forward workshops and teach the maps and whatnot, we call them trigger numbers. So they're trigger numbers that give you permission to do certain things. You know, once you reach a certain either financial position or a certain number of of pounds you're selling a week or whatever, you know that that's kind of permission to start looking at the next endeavor. Or once things get too low, perhaps it's time to start thinking about either stimulating more revenue or closing shop.
Yeah.
How do you guys approach that? Because he was saying something about you don't open a new shop until the one before it is out of debt.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really funny. We're like the most non-business business people.
Well, I beg to differ. Sorry,
don't tell
lovely.
anyone I said that, except I guess we're live, so it's too late to reel it back. But we don't like look at numbers, I don't think, in the same way that other people do. Yes, cheers.
Cheers.
We're just like figuring it out as we go along. Yeah, but we're pretty like debt averse. So we have the great fortune of having lots of opportunities to open retail spaces and do fun projects. And we just basically try to pay for as many things as we can upfront and with cash. And so we really, obviously, like, it's impossible for us to build a roastery without getting some capital. But really our goal is to try to like keep that as low as possible. And so I would definitely say it's true that we're not opening stuff while maintaining a large debt on anything else. So yeah.
You keep saying that you're like not doing the adult thing, but that's very adult of you. That's very responsible. I hope you leave this conversation realizing how fucking grown up you are, woman.
I know. It's just like, I feel like I'm going to be 35 this year. And I just feel like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Like, I feel like I'm 25, but except for when I'm talking to my staff and they're talking about bands and movies and things and I'm just like, oh, I don't know any of those things. So
then you feel older?
So old. Yeah, they're staying the same and I'm getting older. So it's like when I was in my late 20s, we had a crew of staff that would call me mom, and I was always telling them, I'm actually not biologically old enough to be your mom. So let's just remember that. Like, it's fine if you want to call me mom. I'm flattered that you feel that way. But now, I mean, we definitely have staff members that I'm like, I could, in another life, I could have actually been your mom. And it's really weird. So
wait till you see that you've been around like another 10 years. I don't think your business going anywhere very soon other than on the up direction.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Oh, welcome. So with regards to this idea of, not opening a place until the debt's been paid off for the one before that, where did that come from?
I think it just came from us being averse to being in debt. I think, and also just, two things. We don't really want to owe people money. And then the other part of it is that we want to maintain our independence as a couple in business. So we don't want to take on investors and do things like that. And so because of that, we have to get our own capital. And while we are a very busy business, getting a loan from a bank can be challenging. And so if we were to go and try to get a loan with already a sizable loan, it'd be really hard. So we'd have to kind of look at other ways to get capital. And so for us, it's like we want to maintain our independence. And so it's kind of by necessity in some ways, but then also by choice. So
that's so awesome. It sounds like you sat down before you did this and you said, what are the things that we're able to deal with and what are the things that we don't want to ever have to deal with? And let's try and fake our way through the first few years of pretending like we know what we're doing. Yeah. No, it's definitely it's both of those things. I think that we've kind of done a lot of figuring out as we go along. And I think in the beginning we had no idea about investors or, what that would look like. And just to be honest, like nobody was probably interested in that time in us at that time anyways. And so really just over the years, as we've had just various opportunities come up, we've been like, wow, it'd be great to have someone
help us, you know, do things and help us look at things maybe in a more professional way. But then in another way, like we want to do whatever we want, whenever we want, without having to answer to someone else except ourselves. So that's not necessarily like a reckless statement. It's more just of
freedom.
Yeah, it is. And so we don't have anyone that's like, show me the numbers, like show me the growth, show me the progress. I mean, we already have that, both of us internally, where we like want to see growth and progress, but I think we measure that in a different way. We're not necessarily like looking at, P&Ls and balance sheets and stuff like that all the time, where we measure our progress in just a different way. So in that way, it's been good for us to like stay away from, investors, not to say that they're bad. I know a lot of people that work in that world and people in coffee that have that going on. And I think it can be a really good thing. It's just not for us. So
there are a lot of people that come to me and say, hey, listen, I've got no money. And I've been in the industry for a long time. And I think it's time for me to open my own business.
Yeah.
And, how did you guys, because you were both baristas before you opened this business, right?
Yeah.
What was the turning point? At what point did you decide, hey, listen, we need to do this?
Yeah. So he and I were both working at another local shop, and I had been managing several of their cafes for several years. And they're still a business here in town, and they do a great job. And but at the time, they were wanting to slow down. And one of the owners, just every time, or not every time, but every once in a while I'd see her, and she'd just kind of be like, gosh, I can't wait to get rid of this, business. Like I'm tired. I want to slow down. And I was always like, oh yeah, think about me. Like I could, and it was kind of a joke. But then one day the owners came in and they were like, no, really, we would like to kind of change what we're doing. And we have these cafes, and would you like to buy them? And I was like, well, heck yeah, I'd like to buy them. And so, so John and I were fortunate enough, my parents like signed on a bank loan with us to help us get the capital to go for it. And so that's like how we got started. And yeah, so we owe a lot to them trusting that we could do it. And that was pretty nerve-wracking for me, because it's like my parents signing, and they put their house on as collateral and things like that. And so that was really like one of the things that I think pushed us into this no debt thing. Was like, once we paid them back, I was like, oh, awesome. We can, this is great. Yeah. Because, them putting themselves up on the line like that for us was a really huge gift. So,
and the anxiety that comes with that, like failure is no option now, right? Like when somebody does that to you, it's like, oh, fuck. We cannot fail at this. Because we're not the only ones who lose. My parents will lose their house if this shit happens.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And that's my inheritance right there.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
Let's make it worth more than it was.
Right.
And so have you ever looked back and thought we could have gone a different way? Or are you happy that you went that way? Do you wish that you started your own from scratch?
No, I don't know. I spend time looking back on other things in my life and wishing I would have made different decisions. But that decision I thought was great, because the two cafes that we bought were already established. So there was risk involved in the investment and just the change in ownership. Would people still show up? Things like that. But really, like, we already had a guaranteed, in a way, sort of business coming in. So it was really great, because like, it's not like we were opening the door the first day thinking like, how do people walk in the door? How do we get them in the door? So it was a really great way to start. And I had been managing both of those cafes for several years. So I was pretty versed in just the actual nuts and bolts of the shop itself. So I wasn't having to reinvent the wheel in that way while I was learning how to log on to the IRS website and pay taxes, because that was a it's not that hard, but it was like, okay, I know I'm supposed to pay taxes next week, but what am I supposed to pay? And like, where do I pay it? And things like that. So there's definitely like a learning curve there. with all of the things involved in that. But no, I think it was great. And I mean, we learned a ton, and we didn't know, I mean, at that time, we really didn't know anything about coffee. So, I mean, I knew a little bit.
You mean as an industry, or you and John?
Me and John, yeah, specifically. Yeah, we didn't know anything about coffee, just looking back. I mean, I knew a little bit about management. We knew how to prepare drinks in the way that we were doing it. But we didn't know anything about roasting. We didn't know anything about green, anything, producers. We didn't know like what coffee could be. And so it was a great way for us to start, because had we started Onyx at that time, I mean, we definitely started at a way different place than we're at now, but we had a lot of learning to do before we were ready to do our own thing, I think.
So this was like 6 years ago? Or
So we bought those two shops in 2009. Okay. So 9 years ago, I guess. And then
it's almost 10 years.
I know, it's really crazy.
So that means you bought right after the financial crash.
Yeah. We're really lucky in our area because we have a lot of bigger businesses here. We have Walmart is located here. Tyson is a chicken, and various others, and trucking companies. And so the crash did hit here, but not in the same way as other places, because some of those bigger businesses in our area actually did better during that time because people were having to change their buying habits. And so those businesses were actually insulated, or maybe still growing a little bit, whereas other industries were not. So in our area, we were relatively insulated from it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's you kind of everything was conspiring to your success at that time, I guess.
Yeah, no, we've really been fortunate. I mean, we've been, I'll just say we've been like lucky and blessed, and also protected from lots of things that can come a business's way. So
yeah, that's awesome. And so you sold those two businesses?
Yeah, it's all really confusing. So we bought two businesses that were another brand. We sold one of them, and then one of them we converted to Onyx, which is actually the one that I'm sitting in right now. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And so before we converted this one to an Onyx, we had opened an Onyx as well. So at one point we were running an Onyx and then running another brand, and they were relatively separate, if that makes sense. And so this particular shop I'm in is really high volume, tons of customers, and it's been a coffee shop in this location since 1994. And so we were really had to kind of get everything in a row before we could rebrand it, because we didn't want to like fully alienate our customers. I mean, we wanted to do something cool in coffee, but you also still have to like pay your parents back and pay bills and stuff, pay staff. So it was like,
be a grown adult.
Right. Yeah. So we didn't want to do anything until we felt like we were in the right place. Yeah.
Who came up with the name?
I think I want to say both of us. We have another business that's named Anonymous Coffee Roasters, and that company.
My favorite name in coffee. Yeah. I told John that it was my favorite.
Yeah, it's really funny. It was like all based on. He may not have told you this, but it was like partially based on the fact that it was a private label brand, and so we were like, oh yeah, you don't know who roasts your coffee because it's like anonymous. But also he was obsessed with the group Anonymous at the time.
I am.
Yeah. And so it was like, man, that'd be really cool. So in the process of trying to name that company, the word Onyx was thrown out. And I personally just love X's and Y's in the same name. And so it was just kind of a name that was on a list. And as we were working on like, okay, hey, we're going to do another brand, like it needs to be, like a word that's easily recognizable, that's short and easy to say. But we kind of wanted it to be fun, but not something that people couldn't pronounce. And so it was like, oh, Onyx, that's a fun name. Like it's short. It looks nice written in cursive. Like,
yeah, it looks beautiful. The fonts that you guys have used for all of your stuff, as well as like the tattoo vibe that you've got going on with all of it. It's cool without being crass, and it won't date. It's really great.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Can you tell I'm a bit of a fan?
Yeah. You can thank John for not letting me, the wet towel, squash all the tattoo art.
Did you want to?
Yeah. I mean, so for me, I like, I guess, head up our quote unquote operations at Onyx. But, you know, for me, I've been serving customers in our shops for years that are like, you know, 72-year-old women. And I'm like, they don't want to come in and see this stuff on the wall.
Yeah, they do.
Scary.
They do.
I was wrong. I mean, I'm just basically wrong all the time, but you know, I was wrong because I thought it would be aggressive and scary in a way, but
they just want to be part of the cool kids too.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. And I mean, I've definitely had a fair number of people kind of be like, what is that? What is this graphic? What is this symbol or whatever? But one of the things that makes everything cool is that our staff is so welcoming and so kind in the shop that it's not like that. Maybe I'm calling it aggressive. I don't even know that it's aggressive, but that feeling or attitude like behind some of our branding, it's not like you come in the shops and like we have this aggressive staff. I mean, you come in our shops and you have like these people that are amazing and warm and know basically everyone's name and drink, and it's really fabulous. So.
Do you have to teach your staff to learn your customers' names, or do they all just know that that's what they should do?
I encourage them to do it. We actually take names when we take orders. So
yeah, that's so great. And for anyone that's listening that doesn't do that, why?
Yeah.
I just don't understand that behavior.
We used to not. We used to just call it like, 12-ounce latte. But I mean, at a certain point, it's like very impersonal. And I'm still of that generation of service in our shop. So I'll see people at the grocery store. I'm like, hey, there's like a double cap guy. And it's like, I don't know his name because I never learned it a decade ago or whatever. And so it's great to just have a person's name that you can call and look them in the eye and you know their name is Lee and you know what they order and you get really familiar. And so I actually was just in my class I taught this morning, I just always say this, I'm like, hey, I don't require that you develop like deep, dark relationships with our customers, but I do encourage you to learn names and learn drinks and like remember things about people because it enhances the customer's experience, but it also makes it better to work here as a staff member. If you have like the customers are coming in to look for community, but our staff members are also a huge part of that community. So to be able to share in that as a new staff member and encourage them to do that, I'm like all on board with that. So
I don't know if you feel the same way, but for me, being a barista, one of my favorite things was the fact that I got to connect with people all day, every day. It was like the highlight of why I wanted to go to work.
Yeah.
And learning people's names and knowing their coffees shouldn't be a chore. It just feels like it's a part of extending that experience or starting that experience, I guess. I don't know if I'm making sense.
No, it makes sense to me. I absolutely agree. I mean, there's something super cool when you work in a cafe and you know almost everybody and then a new person comes in and then the next time they come in, you remember their name and their drink. I mean, it just like blows their mind. They're like, oh my gosh, you remember me? I've only been in here twice. That's crazy. And it seems really crazy for them because they see that there's a bunch of people in here. But for our staff, it's like, yeah, but you were like the new person in the morning rush last Friday. So of course we remember you, like you're the new person. So welcome. And yeah, I think for me, I've lately been just coming across this theme in general in the last couple of years of my life, but just like sometimes what's most enjoyable or greatest like strength that people have is also like sometimes like least enjoyable and kind of a weakness at the same time. So I think connecting with customers is like, and with our staff members is like one of the best parts of what I do, but it's also one of the hardest parts of what I do because in those relationships, even with customers, there are times when hard conversations have to be had and boundaries have to be drawn. And with our staff, I mean, there's times where you're having to be like, hey, I love you and I need this from you better, and so it's both like super gratifying and it's also super challenging.
Was that a hard part of your growth as a business owner?
Absolutely. Yeah. So in the beginning when we started, I had been managing our shops or that we purchased. And so I had like some knowledge of management. But I was really and I struggle with this still, but how friendly can you be with your staff, just like in terms of being close and also still be their boss? So it's just a really hard line to walk, because when you work closely with people all the time, you tend to get close with them and learn a lot about their lives, and they learn a lot about you. And then you run into a situation where you're the boss and you're having to ask them to change their behavior, or they do something and you feel like, how could they have done that? That actually hurt me as a person. I thought they cared about me, or, whichever way of the street you're going down. And so, yeah, definitely for me, it was a huge learning curve, and still is for me. And I have a lot of like failures connected to that very issue. Just times when I felt like, oh, this particular staff member, I need to have this hard conversation with them, but they're having a bad day, or I'm having a bad day, or, they'll figure it out over time. Like, I don't need to directly tell them that they need to change, or that I want them to do something differently. Like, they'll figure it out. And then going so far down that road that by the time I actually bring it up, it's like this crazy issue when it could have just very easily been like
a comment in passing or something like that.
Yeah, like a slightly awkward conversation that resulted in the results that both parties needed. So that's a huge learning curve for me, and I still deal with it. Nobody really, I don't believe anybody really likes confrontation. So I spend a lot of my time having hard conversations with people in our business, and it's definitely not my favorite thing to do, but it's also necessary. So
I find that I was only having this conversation with myself earlier today. I do that a lot.
Yeah.
But this idea that I'm finding that nuanced communication has become a lost art, and because of that, communicating in general is much more difficult than it used to be. People, and maybe it's just me, but I tend to think that the art of communication is becoming something that people don't necessarily put as much stock in as they used to. And I'm talking about, and forgive me for saying this, young people.
Yeah.
Now I'm feeling really old. But I'm noticing that a lot of business owners are saying to me, "Fuckly, what do we got to do to get these people to just do their jobs? Why do I need to give someone a gold star every time they pull an espresso shot?"
Yeah.
It's their job. And I'm wondering how much communication has to do with that.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to answer or to talk about. I think for me, I have not been a good communicator and have grown into a better communicator. So, but I do agree. There's something kind of out there in our culture right now about, I don't know, I almost feel like it's both, like that having a hard conversation with someone is perhaps something that people feel like shouldn't have to happen, or like doesn't need to happen, or is maybe like inappropriate, or like, like, oh, I was only underperforming just slightly and now I'm getting reprimanded, and that's not fair, or whatever. But then there's also this other side of communication going on in culture where there's lots and lots of like call outs happening. So it's like almost like very polarized. But just in terms of like business, I think it's super important to be able to communicate to your staff what they're doing well on and where they need to improve. And if there's not an established way for that to happen, or if it's not happening, I feel like that it's hard to expect excellence from your staff if either like the business owner can't talk to them, or they can't receive either positive or constructive feedback. So.
I love that. It's in a world where microaggressions have become, like, I hadn't heard that word before last year.
Yeah.
Microaggressions was a new thing. I'd never experienced it. Like, and now it's a commonplace term.
Yeah.
And in a world where the idea of microaggressions exist, I'm 43. In when I came up in coffee, yeah, you didn't dare think in those kinds of terms. Like, you just balls to the wall and you just did the work. And I was working in places that were pumping out 2,000 espresso based drinks a day.
Awesome.
You know, so yeah, Snowflake, you didn't have the opportunity to even say the word microaggression, let alone think that something was being a microaggression.
Yeah.
And I just look at it now and I think, I don't know where this is going to end. Like, if it keeps escalating the way that it's going, I don't know that it's going to be beneficial to the industry. And add to that this idea of automation coming in, I know that a lot of owners are just going to turn around and say, well, fuck this, I don't want to deal with people. If this is the way that it's going to be, I'm just going to move towards automation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely like an art to like a face-to-face real discussion versus, I mean, when I hear the term microaggressions, like I feel like that could play out in like very passive aggressive instruction. Yes. And also just like, because so many people communicate on social media, that like perhaps the way that we're communicating is changing. And, you know, it's much different to sit across from an individual where you can see their face and you can see what's going on and have like a two-way discussion versus having a screen and words where you're separated from them and you are insulated from tone or from all of those beautiful,
nuanced,
subtle, nuanced things that happen in a face-to-face conversation. And so I don't know if that's part of like what's changing the way that communication has in cafes, but it's very hard to get and keep great staff. And honestly, I talk to lots of business owners and managers and people that we work with our wholesale program. And that's one of the main questions that comes to me is like, how do you find great staff? How do you get them to stay? How do you get them to do a good job? And I don't have a super great answer for all of those questions, but that's definitely a huge topic of discussion in our industry because you know, everybody wants, of course, to elevate what they're doing and wants to serve great coffee and wants to have that beautiful story about, you know, the producer that made this coffee and how does all the work behind it translate into this cup and what are you tasting there? And you have to have the right employee to kind of communicate that idea. You have to have the right customer that wants to hear it. But getting your staff to a spot where they can execute their skill set and producing that coffee, and then also have the knowledge and then also have the discretion to know when to share it and when not to share it. It's a real art.
And comes with a ton of frustration.
Yes.
I mean, I experience a ton of frustration with it because I don't understand where the line is anymore, quite honestly. When I'm hiring people and they're super pumped to work for Elixir or with Map It Forward, I actually don't experience the problems with, that's a lie. That's not true, actually. I'm thinking back to earlier this year and I hired a team. I hired 3 people all at one go, and over the span of 6 months, I had the same experience with them. They just said, we didn't realize it was going to be work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's... Yeah.
I'm at that point. I'm like, what am I confused about? Like, it's a job.
Yeah.
2, isn't that what a job is? Like, it's work. I'm paying you for it. This isn't an unpaid internship or anything like that. Yeah. I'm paying you to do this job. And whether it be in Elixir or whether it be in Map It Forward, I keep hearing the same thing. I didn't realize it was going to be work. Well, what the fuck did you come and work for me for? Right?
That's so funny. Yeah, I don't know. It's there's definitely an element of, I mean, I don't see this necessarily a ton inside of our business, but just when we're working on projects with various, you know, people that build things, and I'm not trying to criticize them, but there's definitely like an element of like, just do the basic amount of work and then go home. And so definitely like trying to find individuals that not only understand that places are work, but also what it means to work with excellence is a different thing. And I think as business owners, that's what we all want is excellence, I would say. So
not everybody, like, I agree with that. There are a lot of places that are just happy to take your money, give you the base minimum of what you expect for that, and be done with it. There are a lot of places that are not interested in over delivering.
Yeah. I hope that more places get interested in over delivering.
Yeah,
I do.
You and I both. Yeah. And hearing you say that, you know what, that's what it is. That I keep hearing from the people that come and go from Elixir, particularly, and Map It Forward, though. It's this idea that I'm setting the bar really high. Mm-hmm. Like, you cannot have this beverage packaged the way that it is, on message the way that it is, and delivering the way that it is, and just shoot for kind of sort of average. Like, you taste Elixir and you can tell everything about this roast profile. Yeah. So we're not okay with just a sort of kind of okay roast. Yeah. With anything. And when I say to my people, like, the labels have to be put exactly here. This is where they need to go. I'm not trying to micromanage you or anything like that, but this is a luxury product. Yeah. And people are paying a premium price for it. And we are responsible for making sure that our Elixir dealers get this in a pristine way, so that when they're selling it, it's a no-brainer for them to sell it. Yeah. And absolutely. I keep getting told, like, you're too particular. Yeah. You're not particular enough. Like, I want you to take some pride in your work.
Well, it's definitely true that people consume with their eyes, and they inform what they're experiencing with their eyes and the way that they're treated. So there's a huge, I talk a lot about, like, you could have the world's best coffee in, like, kind of a beat up air pot, and you serve it in a paper cup with, like, you just serve it like, here you go. And someone walks out and they're like, yeah, it was all right. And then I firmly believe that you can have, like, decent coffee served in a really nice way. Like, the presentation is great and the service is amazing. And people walk out and they're like, that was amazing. Like, that was the best cup of coffee I've ever had. And not that I, like, think it has to be that separate, but I talk to my staff a ton about that, because I'm like, hey, we know we have great product. Like, we know we have great coffee, but our job in the cafe is to put all of those finishing touches on it, because we, like you guys, I mean, we are growing more and more high end. And so people expect a high end experience, whether it's in our cafe or whether it's someone receiving a box of coffee from our website or whatever. Like, it needs to look a certain way to help reinforce that idea that's like, hey, this is nice coffee in here. The label is on straight. Like, the box looks nice. Like,
care went into this.
Yeah, like, I can taste that it feels great. You know, taste that it was cared for because it came to me in a cared for way. So there's definitely a lot to that, for sure.
I spend a lot of my time as a business owner, like, if I question myself anywhere, and I question myself everywhere, but the one place that I keep questioning myself about as a business owner is, like, what am I getting wrong with regards to the hiring thing? Is it like, I used to have a boss who, he micromanaged us so much that if we grabbed the wrong end of the napkin when we were folding it, we would get into trouble. Like, that's how much we were micromanaged. So you weren't allowed to grab, like, the left corner first and bring it and fold it over to the bottom. It had to be the top right and fold it to the bottom left. Like, no matter whether you were left-handed or right-handed, that's just the way it had to be, because many people had done it before you, and that was the way that was the most efficient way to do it. And I remember feeling so frustrated because, you know, there was a certain way to stack the dishes. There was a certain way to turn around and grab the pitcher handles. Everything was very specific. And I used to curse under my breath every fucking minute. Like, I hate this place, but I'm learning so much. And I learned so much about systems and workflow from that place. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that it influenced me in the way that we do production and bottling with regards to Elixir, because he was right to some level. Like, this was a place that was pumping up thousands of espresso-based drinks a day, and efficiency was paramount. If we lost 2 seconds over 500 napkins, that made a big difference.
Yeah.
And this was no game. We were literally sweating by the end of by the time we got to have our lunch break. Whether it was a cold day or a hot day, we were sweating because we were working so hard.
Yeah.
We couldn't move from our spot. 3 baristas, 2,000 coffees a day, and it was
a lot.
It was brutal. And if the coffee wasn't perfect, Andrea, I've never felt so ashamed of myself, because the hardest beverage for me to make in this place. I'm so embarrassed.
What is it?
I couldn't make a hot chocolate.
That's awesome.
The thing is, so we started with powder. We had to put the perfect amount of water into the bottom of the beverage with the powder and stir it. And the thing was, if you didn't get the Rosetta perfect, it got thrown away immediately.
Oh my gosh.
So it wasn't about, can she make a hot chocolate? It's about, can she make a perfect hot chocolate? And look, because the consistency, when you're starting with powder and you have to put the perfect amount of water in it, and of course you've got to press the button on a PB, on a linear. This is the old school linears. You have to press the button and have put the cup in just this perfect amount so that it's got the right amount of water.
Gushing out.
It's gushing out.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you can't tip the water out because you've already got the perfect amount of chocolate in there. So then you're frantically trying to do this thing and get it to the right consistency with no powder left in there, because of course, while you're trying to pour a Rosetta and a lump of chocolate that's in an air bubble just comes up and pops, you're like, now my Rosetta is lopsided.
That's amazing.
It was soul destroying. And the thing is, I was the apprentice barista at this place. This was way, way back. This was 15 years ago. And so I'm the apprentice barista, and I ended up having conniption fits every time a hot chocolate came in, because the apprentice barista was supposed to be the easy drink.
The easy drink. I love that.
And I just could not, for anything, I just could not get this drink right. And I remember the first time I nailed it, because they give you 3 goes. We're so busy. You're allowed 3 goes. If you don't do it, you have to pass it on to the next barista. And I remember when I got it the first go, everyone was like, yes, Miss Lee did it. And I'm like, oh, this is embarrassing. They're celebrating at the fact that I could make a hot chocolate.
That's amazing. I love that. I also love hot chocolate.
Yeah, me too. I used to.
Love it. When I see you in person, would it be weird if I tried to get you to make me a hot chocolate?
I would be honored to make you a hot chocolate.
Because I bet you are so good at it.
The thing is, I became so obsessed with making really good hot chocolates and really great decaf.
Yes.
After that, because decaf was the other thing I fucked up all the time. Yeah. And I don't know why I became really big on making sure that I had so much practice at making those 2 things.
That's so
but
funny.
It also became a thing of, people seem to undervalue the value of a hot chocolate and a decaf coffee.
Yeah. Agreed.
But I would happily make you a hot chocolate. Yeah. It's been a minute since I stood at an espresso machine, but yes, if I ever come and visit you, I'm going to jump behind your bar and make you a hot chocolate.
I want you to. That'd be great.
I can't tell you. I'm rather hard on my puppy baristas now. If ever I'm doing training, I'm like, you need to nail this fucking hot chocolate.
I love it. I think that's great.
Yeah, but embarrassing all at the same time. Hey, so talk to me about competition. I've never competed.
Yeah.
I came up in a time in the Australian coffee industry when competing was really frowned upon. It was, because I guess the idea was this doesn't really represent what goes on at the bar, particularly in Australia. It was so high volume. So doing what we did in competition, or doing what we did at the bar, wasn't indicative of what you did in competition. So if you entered competition anytime before 5 years ago, I guess, in the Australian coffee industry, it was something that was really kind of frowned upon unless you were doing unless you were going to the Worlds. That was something that was not well received by your peers.
Yeah.
You have competed loads.
Yeah. I'm in my 6th season, so it's been a journey for sure.
So what made you make the decision to start competing?
Actually, John encouraged me to compete. So I wasn't particularly interested in competing. And partially because of that reason that you just said, like I would watch, he kind of mentioned it to me, and I watched some of the world of the WBC, and I had that thought. I was like, this is interesting, but this is not where my skill set is. I'm a cafe barista, and I'm good at making lots and lots of drinks in a small amount of time, but this is something different. It, you know, I don't know. It was just kind of like, I don't know, maybe like, I don't feel like I need to go prove anything. And because he's amazing and he just knows that I'm probably the most competitive person ever.
Really?
Yes. He was like, you should do it. Like one would like it. And then he started to kind of make the argument of like, it's not only like, will you like it, but it would be great for our business if you would start doing it. And so I was like, I mean, okay, yeah, I'll try it out and we'll see. I went to my first competition essentially by myself, because at the time it was like, we can't both be gone, you know? Yeah. And so I drove up to Minneapolis by myself, and I was 10 weeks pregnant with my first daughter.
The first time you competed?
Yes. Yeah. And I had signed up before I knew I was pregnant. And during that first pregnancy, I couldn't smell or taste coffee without feeling like I was going to throw up.
Wow.
And so I went up there, and I just knew nothing about it, you know, and I had like done some work, and like, you know, I had like watched some competitions, and I had like done some training, and, you know, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I took my grandmother's china, because that's what you do when you're from the South and you want to impress, is you roll out the china. So, and I only took 4 of what was a teacup, but I was using for caps because I was going to serve 4. And I had 6. I thought about packing all 6, and I'm just slightly superstitious. And I was like, why would I plan to make a mistake? Like, why in the world would I take extras and assume that I'm going to do something stupid? Like, I'll just take 4. So the very first thing I did was drop a glass bottle of water on top of one of her cups.
Oh, shit.
And, you know, it's like, you're not finding one of those at Target or whatever, like the day of. So I didn't really know what to do. And because I was so tied into the fact that I was using, I use all of her stuff for all the courses. And so I went to Target, and I bought super glue, and I super glued it back together. And then I used it, and I served a cap in it. So, and then awesome. I like got next to last, pretty sure. But it wasn't because of the super glue. It was because I didn't know what I was doing. So that's kind of how I got started. And I just remember driving out of Minneapolis being like, I'll literally never do this again. Like, it was humiliating to get.
Was that the emotion? You felt humiliated?
Yeah, I did. Because
you're competitive?
Yeah, because I'm so competitive. I didn't go to get next to last. I went to win. And so when I drove out of there, I was like, I'm never doing this again. Like, I know I'm a good barista. Like, why would I need to come back to this and like prove anything, you know? But here I am 6 years later, and apparently I'm still trying to prove something. So
tell me the mindset. I'm fascinated by people's mindset, especially like I want to learn so much about your competitiveness, because I have zero competitiveness in me. And so I've spent this year trying to learn how the mindset of competitive people work, because I think I could benefit from being a little bit competitive, but I don't know how to be.
That's really funny.
Yeah. Well, not really. It's actually quite sad.
Well, I guess my mindset is I don't know. It's various ways. I'm like so competitive. I feel like I have it under control now, though, because I guess I'm getting older. I'm more of an adult. But I, for a long time, like didn't ever want to play card games or board games or just casual games because I was so competitive that I would just get pissed if I lost. And so, you know, you're having like a casual game of like Monopoly with friends or whatever, and you lose and you're like pissed about it for the rest of the night. It's not exactly a good thing. So, you know, so in some ways it's like not great. But because of that, I just don't play casual games anymore, or I just like fully detach myself from the game. And the only game I can like extract myself from is I think it's called skeet ball, where you like roll a ball up a ramp and it goes into like different holes that are different scores.
Yeah, I've not seen that before moving to America. That looks like so much fun.
It's really fun, and every time John and I encounter one, I mean, we are just like, let's go. And like, and go all out. And then the other game is rock, paper, scissors. And he always throws scissors first, which makes no sense. But we play that a lot to determine things like who's changing the baby's diaper, like who's doing certain things. Like we're like, all right, let's do it. But no, I mean, I like competing. I think it's fun. And that's definitely not, I mean, I've kind of made some jokes while I've been talking about competition, but really like when I go to compete, I go to do really well for myself. And I actually do try really hard not to compare myself to other people because, there's so many people doing really cool things in competition. And so if I like watch other people before I go, or I, you know, do certain things, I feel intimidated and I feel like, you know, like I'm not going to be good enough, things like that. And so really my mindset going into competition is like, I want to do really well, but I also want to, is that really loud?
It's a little bit loud, but that's okay. I can see you trying to concentrate.
I don't know where there it is.
There, just bring it closer to your mouth. That should be perfect.
How about that?
Yeah,
better. Okay, cool. Kind of the way I approach it is just like my goal is to like represent our business and represent my family at competition, and like that the ultimate outcome of it is to like help promote our business, help promote our industry. I'm a big proponent of competition asking questions of the industry. And so I tend to try to like ask questions during my competition presentations. And so that's kind of how I approach competition, because if I approached it the way that I approached skeet ball, I'd be like really disappointed every time. So
when you say the questions that you're talking about, do you mean that you're approaching competition in a sense that, yes, you're competing in front of judges, but you're also competing in a way that allows you to present questions that the industry needs to be asking of itself, so that people watching your presentation can take that away and start asking that of themselves? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I mean, what other platform do you have where many coffee professionals are actively watching the presentations for whatever reason that they're watching? It's like a direct opportunity to speak straight to the industry leaders, which are basically anybody that cares enough to show up at a competition and watch or judge or compete or volunteer, or anybody that watches it on the live stream or various places. Like that is like, at least at this time, in my opinion, that is the place where you have a platform. And so if you are a person that is privileged enough to be in the spot where you have that platform, I think it's our responsibility to be asking big questions and asking the industry to do things to help make sure that our industry is still around in 10 years, because that's something that's a real question in my opinion. So
what was the big question in your last presentation?
So my last presentation was built around the idea about about legacy. And I kind of talked about, I presented the story of a producer in Colombia who is really trying to elevate his own craft in processing and producing great coffees, but is also trying to help his community learn how to produce really high quality specialty coffee to create income streams for a community that is dwindling. And I say
Let's
dwindling.
give him a plug. What's his name?
His name is, oh my gosh.
I'm so sorry for putting you on the spot there. I'll look it up and I'll put a link to it.
No, that is so bad.
I'm so sorry for putting you on the spot there.
No. It's the El Abraje farm. And it's crazy because I named him in it and he came to my presentation.
No way.
Yeah, so I'm a total...
What's the name of the farm again? El
Abraje.
El Abraje.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll include a link to that.
His name is Pablo, is his first name.
Abraje.
That's really, really bad.
And his name's Pablo?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we always say the names out loud of the people that are doing great shit that don't typically get celebrated. So again, I'm sorry I put you on the spot there, but
no, I just learned something about myself. I won't let that happen again.
You really are competitive, aren't you?
Yeah, man.
So he is elevating the farming practices of the people around him so that they can get better prices for their coffee as well. Is that essentially what's going on?
Yeah, and really the kind of one of the overarching things that's happening in several countries, it's hard to speak about every coffee producing country social situations in the same way because they vary so differently from continent to continent. But this particularly is in Colombia, where coffee and also other agricultural products are predominantly being produced by an older generation. So the average coffee farmer in Colombia is around 60 and don't really have children that are around that are interested in agriculture. So many rural communities they're moving to cities to try to find other work. And it's not necessarily that they're finding better work, but they're just tired of that cyclical poverty debt cycle that most coffee producers live in. And so really for me, the last couple of years, which has been edited out until this year in my competition scripts, I keep writing this question of who's going to grow our coffee? Because at a certain point, agriculture, coffee producing is not a sustainable way of life for people in producing countries. And so what is the breaking point of that? And so really what I pointed out, I talked about a lot of things in my presentation, but what I pointed out was that specialty cafes, including ours, are spending more and more money on equipment, serviceware, design, all of these kinds of things, packaging. But then the prices for coffee are not going up in the same way that the industry is spending money on those other items. So, people are spending $2 for green coffee on an espresso blender. Specialty roasters are, and just not paying very much for coffee in general. And so it's kind of, for me, it's one of those things where on our side, it's our responsibility to think about what's going to happen to those people that are producing coffee. And in an overarching way, therefore, to think about what's going to happen to the industry that we love and work in if there's no one producing specialty, because it would just be easier in some ways for some of those producers to just give their farms over to just doing commodity and do other things as well to make income and just put out as much as they can and sell it for whatever the commodity price is and then just be done with it,
Yeah, well, because there are farmers that are cutting down their commodity coffee right now and planting macadamia trees, and the Chinese and Koreans are coming in and buying those crops 7 years ahead of when they're fruiting.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's absolutely a smarter thing to do. There is nothing smart about planting coffee right now.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I just presented some data like 40 years ago. The commodity price at the date of my presentation at USBC was higher in 1978 than it was in 2018. Yeah. You know, and there's just lots of like really interesting data that you can look at. And, you know, you look at that older data and you think about inflation or what was the price of a cup of coffee in 1978 versus now, and what was the price of green on the commodity, like what were we paying for our equipment back then. Like there's just tons of really interesting data in there. And so, you know, I really just wanted to like bring that and point it out to people, because I feel like it's a hard thing to really like know a lot about all of those moving pieces. And so I'm fortunate in that John does tons of traveling and does lots of green buying. So we kind of are involved in various spots along the supply chain. And so, you know, there's lots of people that love our industry. They love specialty. You know, they work in the shop. They're a barista, and they're kind of like, hey, what can I do to help this be sustainable? And, you know, I don't really know the answers to the questions that I ask, or I would answer them. But, you know, I was just trying to point out, like, hey, look at your green buying. Like ask the roaster that you're buying from, what did they pay for this coffee? And I think that they should be able to share some data with you. And when you're, you know, even if you're just working as a barista in a shop, you can still ask those questions of your managers, of the people buying coffee for your coffee program. And if you run a coffee program, you can ask those questions of roasters that you're buying from. If you're a roaster, you can ask those questions of importers. I mean, you know, the questioning can go all the way back. And, you know, I don't know the way to like make a full industry overhaul, but I know that if people that get to the place where we have a platform ask those questions, that people will think about them. So
I don't think that there's a solution yet for how we make that shift on a greater scale, but I think that right now we're in the midst of creating enough of a care factor. You know, it's when people like you present these questions in your competitions. It's the amount that we talk about it on this podcast. It's the amount that people like you and I go and have these conversations en masse, and other people that are having them. Chris from Keys to the Shop is doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, right now we're at that phase of changing the direction whereby we're just raising awareness, because the green buyers have been trying to get us to pay attention to this for 15 years and nobody listened. And so it wasn't until, and I'm embarrassed about that, because I remember going to a talk when there was a documentary in Australia about 4 years ago. I remember going to a talk that came after the movie. And there was 3 green buyers in Sydney that were saying at that time, listen, we need to be paying more for coffee, because this isn't going to be sustainable. We're going to have a real problem. And I didn't really pay attention until this year when I saw an article that Mark Dundon wrote. So I speak about it all the time in this podcast. It's an article that's termed "Specialty Coffee is Dead to Me." It's on LinkedIn, on his LinkedIn, if anyone wants to see it. But he says, we have invested in the front end of specialty coffee to a nauseating proportion. But the back end of specialty coffee has had no love. And you know what's going to happen? We're going to get bitten in the ass because of it. Because rightfully so, these farmers are going to make the decision of, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I was on a podcast yesterday. It hasn't aired yet. It's an investment podcast. Cool. And not that I'm somebody who should be talking publicly about the sea market at all. I have zero credibility to be talking about the sea market in any way, shape, or form. But it's a podcast called Cocktail Investing. And they do niche investing, and Elixir is in a niche market. It's a luxury product, and so they had invited me a few months ago to talk about how you get a luxury brand out there and build the brand, etc., etc. And I sent the guy that owns this podcast a link to an article that Reuters had released about the sea market being the lowest it has been in 12 years, and how there was going to be a big meeting going on, I think, in Norway earlier this week, and that a lot of the growers were asking Nestle and the big companies to show up to this meeting so that they can start talking about the commodity market and how damaging this can be. So he asked me to come back on the podcast. We had the conversation yesterday, and he said, do you think anybody's actually taking notice of what's going on in the commodity market? And I said, well, certainly the people that are buying the coffee at less than $1, they've got hard-ons for what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Like, for them, this is great. But just to give you some perspective, it costs around $2 a pound on the low end to produce a pound of coffee. And so if we're paying less than $1 for it, what do you think is going to happen? And we finished the podcast, and he said to me after that, I think that we need to start alerting some people to what's going on. I'm like, well, they're going to be woken up to it when this snaps back like a rubber band and the C market goes to $3 or $4.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Nescafe are spending a lot more money on their Robusta than they ever imagined that they would.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's frightening times, huh?
It is, yeah. And, you know, for us, I'm just very, I guess John and I like try to be really aware of, but not afraid of those things. You know, we approach our business in several ways. And one of those ways that I kind of talk with John a lot about is just that I really believe that we're like stewards of the business. Like I really feel like that the opportunities we have been like given to us, and that it's our job to like steward what we have, but it doesn't necessarily belong to us. And I know that sounds bizarre because we are the owners, but that it is like a fluid thing, and that like we're being asked to care for it and to care for the people that are here. And we're doing that to our best ability, and we want to continue to grow our business. But we do know that there potentially is a timeline on our business because of what you're talking about. And if the specialty producers specifically decide to invest in other areas, which I wouldn't blame them in any way, that could drastically change what we are capable of doing. And so, you know, like we want to create long-term career jobs for as many of our staff people as we can. And we want to create something that we could potentially pass to our children someday, and like, you know, create something that supports as much as possible people all down the line. But we're unsure about what the stability of that is long term because of all of the issues that are happening and all of the pricing stuff that's just not great all along the way. So
I'm of the feeling that we keep falling into these cyclical kind of like 10-year kind of cycles around coffee. You know, it goes to an all-time low and then it's reactive and the price goes up, but the farmers have already pulled their trees out. And so therefore there's, you know, low demand. Well, there's low supply and the price goes up. We know this is what's going to happen. You know, we're not getting to a point where we can, and this is what I would like to see. If there was any way that we could stop this from continuously being like this gut-wrenching process, given that coffee is the second most traded commodity in the world, there's always going to be a demand for it. But we need to have it so that it's not so like dysfunctional as it is right now, right? Like, shouldn't we be finding a way to have it a little more balanced than it currently is?
Yeah, I definitely think that we should be. And I think, you know, we said this earlier, but I don't know what the answer is, but I definitely know that like you said, the more people talk about it and the more we discuss it, the more people are likely to create a different system, at least for themselves in their purchasing habits. And that, you know, over time could potentially help the issue, but it's a very interesting time, that's for sure.
Well, because Chris was saying to me yesterday on this podcast, he's like, so what can we do to fix this? Like, what are you telling people that they need to do? And I said, look, straight up, I have no answers.
Yeah.
But from a buyer's perspective, if you are somebody who purchases coffee, start moving your business towards specialty shops. Ask them what they spend on their coffee. Make sure that they're actually purchasing consciously and they're paying fair prices. They have relationships with the farm. And if you're putting your efforts into those places, you're likely to be much less affected when this jump goes on. Because this blew my mind. He pays $18 a pound for coffee at Pete's. What the fuck? Like, how much can Pete's actually be spending? Like, surely they're not spending $5 a pound on coffee. There's no way Pete's is spending that kind of money.
Yeah.
So and I know that Starbucks buys specialty grade, but I'm not sure that Pete's does.
Yeah.
And so if he said, Lee, so if the number that I'm paying right now is commodity and that goes up, there's no way I'm paying $30 for coffee.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you would be better off going and spending that $18 right now in a cafe that sells you specialty coffee, and you will be much less affected when the market does snap back and go up to ridiculous numbers like what it might.
Yeah.
And we don't know if it's going to stop at 3. Like when it goes back, we don't know if it's going to be 3 times what it is or 10 times what it is.
Yeah.
All we need for Brazil to have a really shitty year, and we're all fucked.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard thing, but I know that like consumer demand drives all of that stuff. And so in theory, if a large amount of consumers were to become educated or have the heart or whatever it is, have the taste, whatever they are doing, have a change in their habits, that the industry would follow behind. So
100%.
It's just a way, how do you affect that amount of people? And I don't know,
I think we have to, like we were saying before, we have to start by getting the message out.
Yeah.
And we can't really do anything until we've got an enormous amount of people wanting to drive the kind of change that we're trying to get them to do. Hopefully having the conversations outside of our industry as well. It's one thing, specialty coffee, we're so good at trying to sell coffee to the kings amongst gods.
Yes, truth. Very true. Yeah.
And we're this tiny little fraction. Like if we want to really be masturbatory about it, we're about 20% of the market, but it's more like 10% of the market.
Yeah.
And us telling each other about this, yes, that's great, because there's not enough people in specialty that actually have these conversations, but we need to be talking on a larger scale about this. I just don't know how we do that. Like, yes, it was great that I was on this podcast yesterday talking about it. It's talking directly to the investment community. Great. But these are still people that are going to be unaffected because they'll just go back to buying $18 and $20 bags of coffee whenever they can.
Sure.
One time.
Yeah.
But going back to competition with you. So have you always had an agenda around your presentations?
Yes. Yeah. So typically every year, John and I mean, it's really a collaborative effort from both of us. I'm the one that's up there, but, we really work on it together. But yeah, every year we think about like, what do we want to say? And I think we're particularly interested in social issues. And so yeah, we definitely develop like a point of view. We develop questions that we want to ask, and then of course story is the thing that people love, that people attach to. So I love stories and I love telling stories, and so for me, I spend a lot of time working on my presentations and weaving story into it. And there's always a little bit of personal story. This past year I played a clip of Pablo discussing, like, I had an hour-long conversation with him where he told me tons and tons of stuff about processing and planting and all of the varieties that he's working on, and all of these things. And then I asked him, like, what do you hope for the future of your farm? And he didn't say anything that he had talked about before. And he said that he hoped that his farm could be a place where the people of his community could potentially, like, essentially find a better way of life through learning how to produce specialty coffee. And it was beautiful. And I recorded that part of that conversation and then played it for the judges during my presentation, because I felt like it was amazing. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, like that's, as much of as competitions geek out about coffee statistics and details and flavors and processing, like his heart really was for his community and how to make what he was doing a positive for his entire community. And so, yeah, but I definitely have a point of view when I'm going into competition. I have a theme and I have a question that I want the industry to think about. So
Pablo's not trying to figure out how he can score some Bentleys.
Yeah.
These people are genuinely looking for, how can we make sure that we have a sustainable life? Like just so we can feed our families and send them to get good educations and have a decent life. Yeah.
And I think Pablo, really, honestly, anybody that's producing competition style or quality rather coffee is typically a person that is in a better station in their community than others. So most of the coffees that I've used in competition come from a farmer who has probably a lot more education than I do and has the means with which to say, like, hey, I'm going to pull up part of my farm and plant a specific variety and take that coffee and spend a ton of time doing this crazy process to see what we can get. So people that are doing that are not the same people that are in as a precarious predicament, but a lot of those people that at least that we work with or that I've worked with for competition, they're like doing that because they want to promote themselves and to promote specialty, but they're also doing a lot of work in their own communities, which is extremely inspiring. I also last year looked at a coffee from an association in Nariño and talked with two farmers there, Raquel and Abdias are their first names, and Foodom is the association there in Nariño. But they both had planted geisha on their farms, and it was like their second year that they were doing the full production, and their what they made from their crop that year compared to the year before was like 5 times the amount.
Wow.
And they were I asked them the same question, like, what do you hope for the future? And they're, I mean, obviously people need to make money to make things work, but they were not talking about, oh, we hope to like double our geisha production, or like, we hope to do a really crazy process that, turns out really crazy tropical flavors in our coffee. They were, again, talking about how could they take what they had learned, reinvest in their community, and make a place where people's children could stay and have a livelihood and have an agricultural, not have an aversion to agricultural production, and like have a community and make it sustainable. And so, really like hearing those people that are leaders in those communities talk about that kind of thing is amazing, because there's an extremely direct correlation to me personally and to most or a lot of people that work in specialty. We're in a station to be someone that's trying to affect positive change in our community. And so really like feeling that energy coming from the producers, and then trying to like take that and communicate something as large as that inside of a 15-minute presentation, 5 minutes of which is you're preparing coffee and you can't really talk. It's a challenge. So it's a big responsibility for sure.
One thing I've always wondered, how do you choose the music?
John chooses the music.
Best answer.
I'm really old. Yeah, it's like, so every year.
You're younger than me, so stop fucking saying that.
I'm an old person in a young lady's body. So every year, John Denver's "Thank God I'm a Country Boy" makes it onto my list, because I am from Arkansas. I was born here. I am a cowgirl. So every year I'm like, John Denver is a yes this year. And John is like, no, like people have to take you seriously. And I'm like, no, I'm serious about this song. I'm serious about it. And he's like, no, I know that you
put it on there, you win.
I'll put it on this year then. So like, no, but he's like, I know that you're serious about it, but like no one else is going to hear that and take it seriously. And I'm like, Okay, but you know, so I mean, we try to pick songs that maybe like not everybody knows, like, you know, songs that are like kind of serious and sweet and, you know, whatever. So because I usually am talking about pretty serious topics. So so he's always telling me, he's like, you know, you're presenting something that's like very intentional, very serious. So to have like people yelling yeehaw like on your music, he's like, it just doesn't fit. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So
just think about it.
Yeah.
You know, you never know. It could be the thing that turns the tide.
It could be. And it's on the list. I mean, it's always on the list. So we'll see what happens when
I'm going to send him an email when we get off here.
Please do. Yeah, it's a good one.
So when are you competing this year?
I think that, so the next step in the cycle is to go to qualifiers, and I think I'm going to the one in Denver, which is the first weekend in December. So that'll be my next thing.
Have you kind of decided what area of the industry you're going to look at to tackle with regards to social change?
I'm still working on that right now, but I've been working on it for about 6 weeks. So I'm getting pretty close. I've got lots of things written, but we don't have our like question yet. So we don't have like the heart of the presentation yet, but it takes a long time to build these things. And the more I do it, it's like, in some ways it gets easier, but in other ways it gets harder. And so, so yeah, I'm just trying to figure out like, what do I want to say? Like what needs to be said, you know, and how can I say it in a way that helps people feel the need for change without as much telling them that there's a need for change. Because I think there's a difference in those two things.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you want to I always tell everyone, don't teach anyone anything. Give them questions.
Yeah.
If they walk away knowing what questions they can be asking themselves and they should be asking themselves, then you've empowered people with the opportunity to think.
Absolutely.
And it's so important.
Yeah, it is. And there's just so much nuance in our industry and nuance in every area that I could look at. And then there's also just that we are also people here at Onyx that we try to make great strides, but we also make mistakes, and we are also sometimes part of the issues that I'm pointing out. And so I never want to stand up there and be like, hey, this is what all of you all should do. Like, I want to stand up there and say, hey, what about this question? Just like you just said, like, what about this? What are we all going to do about this? And I feel like that's something that's really important to me, is just to, when I'm putting together my presentations, like, I put a lot of thought into what am I asking of people? And then what am I going to do about what I'm asking? Because there's always room for us to improve and to be better and to continue to try to do the best we can with what we have.
How has being a mother changed the way that you approach that mentality?
Oh man, it just, everything.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. When, you know, I don't know, it's really, for me, it's really important for me to like show my daughters what it looks like to work really hard. You know, just when you mentioned earlier, like, you having staff members that are like, oh, I didn't realize this was going to be a job. Like, when that really resonates with me, because when I'm at home, like, I try to have really set, like, I'm not working during this time, and like, I'm doing like whatever the kids want. And then I have other times where I'm like, hey, I'm home and I know you want to play, but like, I'm working. Like, I have to work, because this is how we make our life possible, is that I work. And last season, I spent almost 6 months, for about a 6-month time period, I spent almost every Saturday and Sunday at our roastery practicing for competition.
Wow.
Which is a lot of time. And my daughter would just periodically ask me, like, what are we doing tomorrow? And I'm like, well,
I must go to work.
I'm working. And I think sometimes people, I don't know, I feel like some people are like, oh man, you shouldn't work that much and you should spend more time with your family. Maybe not me specifically, but it's like,
of mothers.
Yeah. It's like, hey, like, you should be raising your kids, and, you know, and then, so I try to keep those things as a balance, but I also want to not just tell them that they need to work hard, but like show them what hard work looks like, and show them what it looks like to try to go in front of our industry, which honestly, like people like to watch competition and then be like, oh, that was great. But a lot of people don't necessarily like what I'm saying. I mean, you know, definitely
it's challenging, right? To hear that you are saying things that our industry has wanted to ignore for a very long time.
Right. And it's also just not, I mean, for me, parts of competition are really fun, but parts of it are just not fun at all. And it's really hard, and it's really emotional to go in front of our industry and be transparent and be open and like put my heart into those presentations. It's just really challenging. So for me, I try to like tell my daughter, who's now 4, and then we have a 3-month-old baby, so I can't tell her yet, but not just tell her like, hey, this is what we're doing for work, and like this is how we support ourselves, and this is how we support all of those people that you love that work for us when they come over, is that I go to competition and I work really hard and I try to promote our industry and I try to promote our business. And that's, you know, that's kind of, I don't know, it's not really necessarily how I try to balance it, but I think it's great for women to be out there doing those kinds of things and showing the next generation of women, like, what does it look like to do this?
I think that's such a fantastic approach to it. I have been wondering how we frame the conversation in our industry around the idea of, because I don't like the idea of being exclusive in order to be inclusive. You know, the idea that we need to have women in coffee groups, I think it plays an important part for some element of it, but we can't separate ourselves out if we want to be included. And I think that being a part of competition with everybody else, like coffee competitions that are just for women in coffee, I don't think that they're constructive. I think when women like you just do the job, just get in there and understand how intimidating it is, and understanding that, yes, I'm a woman, but I'm a human and I have all these other things that are attached to me. I'm a mother. I'm a business owner. I am all of these things, and I'm going to get the job done. And I don't know how the fuck I'm going to do that, but I know that I am, because I'm a woman and I will get it done. And I think that that's the best way we move the needle.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm being super idealistic, but I don't think there's a silver bullet for this.
Yeah. I don't think there's a silver bullet for it either. And I think I like all of the movements that are going on around women. And I think all of those things, I'm hoping, will encourage women to continue to step into that mainstream, whether it's competition or whether it's just like other areas of the industry. I think the industry is not as accessible for many women and for moms. I mean, I'm in a specific position where I can work and I can be a mom because I'm in the position to set the rules for myself and my business. But if I was working as a barista here and I had to be here at 6 a.m. and I have 2 kids, I have to either have like a partner that is on board with doing all of the things that involve like getting children to various places later in the morning because there's no childcare open at 6 a.m.
Yep.
You know, and I have to be a breadwinner enough for my partner to not be doing that morning, you know, to be participating in the morning children situation. And I also have to be in a job where I can call in the last minute because I have kids throwing up, or I have a partner that can call in at the last minute. And, you know, I can bring my kids to work because
you're the boss.
Who's going to tell me not to?
Exactly.
Except angry customers. If they told me not to, I'll be like, okay, I won't. But, you know, so I'm in a unique position, but one of the things I see happening in competition is I don't see very many serial female competitors. So this past year, Cole McBride won the United States Barista competition, and it was like his 10th year of competition or something crazy like that. And he's there every year, and he's like working really hard and perfecting everything. And he like just knocked it out of the park this year. And for me, like I look around inside of the people that made it to the USBC, and there are definitely some really quality women in there, but I don't see very many women doing it over and over and over and over. And I think that that's something that needs to happen in order to like help the numbers get more equal and all of those things. But I think as women, we just have different social responsibilities. And I think as women, we also perceive things differently. I mean, when
the importance of things, you mean?
No, just like for me, when I go to, and this is going to be a generalization because I don't know how men think. But when I go to like a judging debrief and I am told hard feedback, it doesn't make me walk out and want to be like, oh yeah, one point next year, I'm going to show you exactly how much better I can be. It like crushes a piece of me to get that kind of feedback, which is kind of what happened my first year of competition when I drove out of Minneapolis. And I was like, I'm never doing this again. Like, I mean, you know, in the most like funny kind of theoretical way, like I literally brought my grandmother's china and smashed it and glued it back together for my presentation. And then I scored really poorly. And I had things being said to me in the debrief, like, your cappuccino was the best one I had today, but I scored it at a 1.5 because of this. And so, I mean, I didn't know anything about competition, which is why I scored so poorly. But, you know, I think as a woman, when you hear things like that and you have put so much heart and time and effort into it, I don't want to speak for every woman either, but I feel like as women, we operate maybe more with our hearts than some men do. And so when you receive that kind of feedback, it's like, why would I ever come back here and expose myself to this situation where I can be like getting last place in the competition, or I can be getting told that like all of my efforts like resulted in a really low score. And the judges are not being malicious. It's just part of how that system works. And I see less women coming back for more, if you will. And I see lots of men that come back for more. And I think it's just like a difference in the way that men and women approach those competitions.
You've said so many very wise, interesting things that have raised very many questions in just what you said there, because I was speaking with, so I'm going to put a plug in here for Demelza Jones in Australia, who yesterday launched Same Cup, which is an organization that has just launched in Australia for women and queer folks in coffee, and encouraging them around the idea of competing because of this very thing. You see men again and again and again going back to competition, and you do not see women compete more than once or twice, and barely any queer folk are competing because it's a very intimidating machismo kind of environment. Like, it's very charged with testosterone because there's so many men in it. And, you know, Demelza and I were having a conversation about how we change this. And it's not, doesn't just need to be changed in Australia. It needs to be changed everywhere.
Yeah.
You know, how do we bring more women to competition? And I think you really touch on something that's important there that I've been doing a lot of study on recently about the different ways that men and women communicate. And there is scientific studies that have been done on this that show that men and women communicate very differently and needs to be communicated to very differently in order to receive the information the same. So these psychological studies have shown that women are evolutionarily programmed to communicate with more empathy and more compassion, and men are evolutionarily programmed to communicate with more aggression and with more competitiveness. And they need to be communicated to in those same ways in order for the messages to land the same. So if you say exactly what you were talking about the cappuccino, if you say that in a very haphazard kind of way, and deliver it very cutthroat to a woman, that's going to land really hard. But to a man, he's going to really appreciate that, because that's the way he's programmed to receive information. Whereas if you don't need to coddle a woman, you just need to communicate it with compassion and with empathy, and she'll receive it in that way and be able to do something with it.
Yeah.
And so this is what the science is saying, and we're going to talk a lot about it in what we're going to be doing in Australia in these workshops. So if you are keen on learning more about this, to anyone who's listening, come to that, and you can attend virtually, and there's going to be a psychologist there that's going to be talking about it, and everything. So, but my point is that I think I might have some part of a solution to this. I think we need to start training and coaching women in competition in a committed way. And I think a part of that training and competition needs to be about these communication strategies, not just in the presentation. I think it's about the environment and desensitizing women to the environment and teaching them the fact that, listen, you're going up there and you are terrified and nervous and all of those things, but these men that are competing are feeling equally as nervous and equally as terrified, and they've thrown up 3 times before they get on stage, just like you will, and they're panicking about all of this. You are on an even play, and destigmatize a lot of these emotions that these women are feeling, because I feel that they're completely unaware of the fact that this is the same kind of a situation that they're going into, as their reptilian brain is feeling threatened in a competition. And if we can help women understand that and get their head around it, I think that they will feel safer to compete.
Yeah.
And if we can help them get past that, women don't need help with the presentation. That's not the part. Doing that part of things is not necessarily difficult. Like, we should be letting people do what they want on that side of things. But I feel that the training that we need to find a way to deliver to women and queer folk who typically don't tend to compete is, listen, this is what's actually going on with you psychologically. You are feeling terrified by this process. You're feeling terrified by the feedback that you're receiving, and we need to frame that differently. And we could also probably teach the organizations that are holding these competitions how they could better deliver feedback that's kind of neutral.
Yeah. I think that's all really interesting. And when you were talking about that, I was just thinking about my experience at this year's USBC, and I can't really compare it to other years because I don't remember, because I had a kid, and so you lose like lots of brain cells when that happens. But just thinking about I'm very talkative backstage. Like, I like the community of people that are competing, because I do feel like it's like we're all in it together in a way. Like, like you said, we're all like throwing up in the bathroom, and we're all like freaking out. And, you know, when I think about it, it's like, particularly this year and probably in years past, like the only thing that made it feel overly male was just that there were more males back there, but not necessarily that the attitude of those individuals was like, I'm a dude, I'm better than everyone else. Like, I didn't see any of that. In fact, I saw lots of help going on between the different competitors, lots of camaraderie, lots of like people getting hard feedback from judges and being backstage and being upset and being consoled by other competitors in the back room. And so it was just a very interesting year for me, because I just kept thinking, like, why are there more males here than other communities? Like, why are there so few women here? It's not, I didn't feel that it was like a cutthroat atmosphere.
But you've been back so many times, right? So this is you being very comfortable in this situation now. And I wonder, the women that have come before now, granted, I want anyone that's listening to this, before I get any fucking hate mail about Lee's against men in coffee or anything like that. No, I think that the men that are in coffee these days are opening their eyes to how intimidating this industry can be to women. And I think there is a shifting that's happening now. And we're in the midst of that starting to turn. But before now, that wasn't necessarily the case. And the women who were competing, I believe that could be a reason why they're not coming back, is because competition before now wasn't always the way as supportive as it has been at this point.
Yeah. No, I agree. And at this year's competition, I talked to several of the women that made semifinals and didn't make finals. And I just told them, I was like, please come back. Like, we need you here, and you are great, and you're doing a great job. Look at how far you made it. You just have to keep doing it to make it here. I mean, almost no one shows up the first year and makes it all the way, you know? And so like continuing to try to cultivate that amongst the different communities that we want to see represented there, I think is great. And I think you're right about having somebody talk to, you know, coaching women in like, not just like, hey, this is the nuts and bolts of how it works, but also like having someone to go with them to the judges. I mean, John often goes with me to the judges debriefing. And I think in my experience with our judges in the US, they are all like very kind and are very willing to like give tons of time to explain exactly what happened. But when you're in that, at least for me, when I'm in that emotional like moment, like I can't hear anything that they're saying.
You can't receive it the way it, no matter how it's intended.
No, it's like all I can hear is like, I came to do my very best, and for whatever reason, I made a mistake, or I called the wrong note, or the espresso wasn't as good as they thought it should be, or, you know, whatever it is. That's all I can hear is that like I didn't achieve the standard I set for myself. Yeah. And so it's like I can't even hear what they're telling me. And so it's just so, you know, having someone else there to hear it, to like help advocate, to ask questions that you should be asking, even but you're not, because you're totally freaked out. And then to have that person then talk with you about the score sheets later and talk about the feedback at a different time.
Like I think debrief?
It would be amazing. It would just be like, hey, you only heard the negative, but like they said a bunch of positive stuff too. You just didn't hear it. It's like when you go to a doctor's appointment, that's going to be tough. You take someone with you to ask questions so you can hear, you know, so they can help interpret. I don't know.
I think that's really important. And I think the idea that even recording the conversation, the debrief that you're having with the judge or whatever, so that you can sit with someone when you go back home and listen to that and unpack it together. But I think what we're trying to say here and what we're getting at as we kind of explore this idea together is we need to start teaching women and anyone who feels intimidated in these situations about strategy. Yeah. And approach and preparing your mindset for these situations. We as women are evolutionarily programmed not to be competitive. That's not what our role is. Our role is to be nurturing. Our role is to look after everyone. That's our genes and our hormones are all conspiring to that. So when we put ourselves in a situation of competitiveness, our reptilian brain goes into that space whereby we feel that we may be being attacked and we go into defensive mode. Whether we want to or not is different. And even though we've chosen to put ourselves in this position. So the psychology behind competition is something that I think we're not addressing enough in our industry. And I think that if we do want to help more women get into competition and stay there, I think that this could be a way that we could be more supportive and help them understand that, listen, after you finish and you go and get that feedback from those judges, this is how you should expect to feel. And so run that scenario through your mind 1,000,000 times before you leave to go to the competition, and know that this is likely what's going to happen, but have a strategy for how you're going to deal with it. Yeah,
I think that's great.
Now we just have to find the right people to tell us so that they can implement.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is a fun fact. I still haven't looked at my score sheets from last year's USBC because it was, for me, just like the amount of effort I put into it. And then
it's soul destroying, right?
It's so hard. And then in the finals, I made a couple of like really large mistakes that are not like me. And I just like can't bring myself to even look at them. And I'm going to have to, because I'm rolling into qualifiers and I have to see where I can improve. So I have to do it at some point. And John keeps periodically, he's like, hey, should we look at those score sheets? I know you don't want to, but should we? And I'm like, not tonight. So at some point.
And it's a part of the growth process, right? Like being able to receive feedback it's an adult skill. Like
it absolutely is.
It's fucking terrifying.
I'm not very good at it. And it's so funny. There's this like thing that follows me through competition, which is thumb heavy. So it's like,
what does that mean?
So in your tamp, they like that's why they're getting really low to see if it's even. And so thumb heavy is like you press harder on one side than the other. And it's maybe like your coffee bed is slightly uneven in your portafilter. And so I like to joke because I have one of those, well, both of my thumbs, but my thumb, it looks like a toe.
Yeah, my mother's got that. That's genetic, you know.
Yeah. And so it's like, I always like to joke that I wasn't actually thumb heavy, but because of the way that my thumb lays, it looks like it was thumb heavy. And so every time I see that on my score sheets, I just get so irritated because I'm like, there's just no way it was thumb heavy. There's no way it was thumb heavy. And it's like,
my genetics.
And then like, but then like 2 years ago, John was like, hey, at a certain point, you have to just realize like, you're going to get marked thumb heavy, and maybe you are, and maybe you aren't, but like, you're going to have to hear that feedback and do something about it because you keep getting marked off. So I don't want to, he's like, I don't want to hear excuses about your toe thumb, and he's like my husband, but he's also my coach. So I was like, well, I'm getting counted off. But then later I thought about it and I was like, no, it makes total sense. Like, it doesn't matter whether I agree with them or not. They're marking me off. So like, I have to change what I'm doing because it's going to get marked that way. And who knows who's right? Who knows who's wrong? And so that's something over the last couple of seasons I've been working on. And this year at qualifier or at the preliminaries, I have to announce that I did not get marked thumb heavy. And I consider it like an extreme personal accomplishment. So
I'm rooting for you, lady, because I'm one of these people who's like, if you're complaining about the shit that people keep saying to you all the time, you are coming from a victim position.
Yes.
You have to change that shit because that is not a quality that you want to be. Adults don't act like victims.
Yeah.
Like, and look at everything you've achieved, for God's sake. It's amazing. Like,
but
your thumb should not be the thing that holds you back.
But I'm stuck on, I told you that I feel like a kid. I'm competitive and I feel like a kid. And here I am like playing victim over my thumb, but not anymore. I will not be held captive by my thumb.
We have this thing in the music industry. I was in the music industry for a long time, and there's just some things that singers do. Everyone's got a signature thing that they do, and in the studio, based on the way that your vocal cords are formed, or like your nasal passage, or the way that you breathe, or whatever, you've always got a weird, quirky thing. And no matter how much you practice, just because of perhaps your biology, you can't stop doing it, right?
Yeah.
And so my vocal coach used to say to me, laugh about it and bring everybody on board to laugh with you about it, because then it becomes something that's not so stigmatized and you can't change it. Like, it's not something that you can do anything about it. So find a way to laugh about it, Lee. And I'm not somebody who laughs about shit. Like, I'm the most serious person I know, and annoyingly so. And so this was for me like a big, when I went to laugh about it, I would cry because I would get so emotional at the fact that I was trying to do this behavior differently. And I realized, oh my God, I'm so serious and so hard on myself. So I think what you should do is make a joke about it in the presentation.
Yeah.
And if it's appropriate, get everybody laughing with you about it and point it out, because perhaps there's no other way.
Yeah. Yeah. I could just give like a really big thumbs up.
Yeah. Hey, everybody.
People are like, what is that? Like, what is going on right there? No, it's funny because I call myself the wet towel, and I really am. It's like, I want to use a regular tamper and not one of these like fancy things, which are beautiful and awesome. But I'm like, no, I'm a real barista. I can use a real tamper. Yeah. But this season, and I use a real tamper at prelims, but this season I've been like, if I can't change my thumb, and I can't change that maybe I am thumb heavy or maybe I'm not, then I'm going to change tampers and I'm going to stop complaining about it. So that's what I'm going to do.
I mean, it's the thing is, it never stops teaching you when you do something that's hard, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I keep saying to people who ask about, like, you know, what do you what are you going to do if you're an entrepreneur? Like, what does entrepreneurship show you? Why should I be an entrepreneur? And I'm like, listen, if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you want to know what you should know before you start doing it, know that it is going to show you everything you never wanted to know about yourself.
Yes. Yeah, it really does. It really does. It's like when I walk into our business, I straighten the front mat every time, no matter what, because it's crooked and it just drives me crazy. And I just can't do it. And I didn't think I'd be that person that's like straightening every little thing, but I am. So
yeah. Do you find that being a mother has taught you how to be a more patient entrepreneur, or has it made everything harder?
Oh man, that's a great term, because I keep telling John, I'm like, please pray for me to have patience with our 4-year-old, because I'm tired and I have a baby and it's just so hard for me to be patient. Yeah, I think that being a mom has like lightened me up some, for sure. And I think I'm much more focused now on like, what are our core values and how can I get our staff members to like perform to those core values, and less of like, how can I get our staff members to straighten the front mat?
Yeah,
I love that. I think that's important to have a straight front mat. However, I think that our staff understanding that producing a quality cup of coffee and being kind to our customers is like the most important thing. That if I'm like on them all the time about straightening the mat, does that take away from the core goal? And
that's great.
I think it might. So yeah, in that way, I definitely think being a mom has helped me understand and be more compassionate and empathetic towards our staff and what I'm asking them to do, for sure.
Somebody asked me to ask you from our Instagram live that we did last week. Somebody asked me to ask you, how do you actually achieve being a woman and a mum in coffee without having to compromise what your career goals are?
Gosh, that's
such a big question. Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure that out, but I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I just like have times when I go home and don't work. So I just have for myself, when I'm doing my day at work, I just tell myself, work really hard. And when I go home, I tell myself to work really hard at home, because
at being a mom?
At being a mom, yeah. Both working for our business at home, but then also just being at my house. Like and part of that's just how I'm built. I don't necessarily think that idea is for everyone, but when I'm at home, I'm like, I'm going to work really hard. So if I'm like folding our family's underwear, like I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to do it well and I'm going to do it quickly so I can get back to talking with my family or I'm going to like be showing my daughter how to do that work that I'm doing at our house. And so my feeling about it, and then when my kids go to bed, I often tell myself, like, this is the time now for you to work really hard at being John's partner. Like I might want to just go to bed because I'm tired. And I do that some, but then the other part of me is like, hey, this is like the 1 hour of the day that you have to sit here with him and like listen to him and tell him things. And maybe we're just like watching a show and vegging out, but that is as important for me to like put the same kind of effort into as running my business. And so I just tell myself, like, work hard at all of those jobs, do the absolute best that I can, and that's all I can do.
So intentionality is a driving force, as particularly as, you know, being a mum at an espresso machine is challenging and you won't be able to do that job. Like there's no way you can't pretty that up. And as much as people want equality of outcome, and equal opportunity and all of that really great stuff, I'm not a fan of equality of outcome, but I'm an absolute advocate of equal opportunity. There are some things that physically stop you from doing that. And standing at an espresso machine, if you've decided to be a career barista, it may not be something that you can do for the time that you are 8 months pregnant and for the first few months that you have the baby, and you have to figure it out and plan for that. And is there another job that you can do in the cafe or in the admin side of things? Or this is not something to be ashamed of. You know, we can't turn around and say, well, women should be able to do this the whole time that they're pregnant. And as soon as they want to come back to work, well, do you really want to be doing high volume espresso while you're 8 months pregnant? I mean, I've never been pregnant, but I imagine it sounds fucking horrible.
Yeah. And, you know, every woman is different. So some people like can be pregnant and do a bunch of things, and other women cannot, and they have to rest either by personal choice or the doctor has told them that, you know. And so one of the great things is that our industry is expanding, and there are more and more jobs in coffee that are not actually standing at a machine making coffee. And I think that as a woman, if you just know, hey, I'm going to have a family in this time frame, or I would like to have a family in this time frame, I feel like that hopefully you might be afforded an opportunity that would allow you to do that and have a sustainable lifestyle in terms of like time and the physical demand, and also have your children. So that's how I do it. I mean, I have ended up in a spot where I can make my own rules in a way. I mean, there's definitely like, I have lots of responsibilities that must be performed, but I can do those with my kids, or I can do those in spite of them, if that makes sense. So,
well, you competed twice while pregnant, heavily pregnant.
Yeah.
The second time, right?
Yeah, I was 7 months pregnant this last time around. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I want to congratulate you on the fact that you are advocating for just continuing with life while pregnant. You didn't stop achieving you while carrying this other human inside you. And I think that really advocates for women being awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
You're welcome. And 2 hours in, I think that we should let you off the hook and get back to running your business. Thank you so much, Andrea. It's been such a pleasure having you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I always am just totally excited and honored to be asked to do really anything. I mean, we're from Arkansas, and it just, to have people that want to talk with us about whatever is just such a huge honor, and I don't take it lightly. So I really appreciate that you reached out to us, and we've just enjoyed working with you in all of the ways. So.
Oh, you've given me chills, lady. Thank you so much. I see you guys as not only good people, but I see you as great, and a great example of what can be achieved if you have great intentionality. And so much stems from that, and so much progress and example comes from doing that. So keep doing it, and I can't wait to see what you guys end up doing 10 years from now. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.